Okay, so we're back. JR here, your grumpy sound guy. And I had promised a conversation on ROI, return on investment. There's a whole lot of YouTube channels out there that, cover tons of mixed tips and, system tech type stuff and that sort of thing. But there's not a ton of guys in the production business that talk about the business end of things, and this conversation about ROI is a great place to start. When I say ROI, return on investment, I'm basically talking about, being smart enough to buy gear that's going to make you money. What is your return on your investment in the gear you got sitting in your shop or you got sitting in your trailer or whatever. There's tons of guys in this business that are gear junkies. I am a gear junkie myself, so I'm not judging, but I try to be intelligent about how I buy equipment and about how I do stuff, because I need that gear to make me money. I am a big fan of, EAW and L Acoustics and D&B and, all the big dogs that are in the audio business, but I'm a bigger fan of money in the bank, and I say that because what has made me, I own an old 850 KF SB 850 rig, EAW rig that is my favorite rig to mix on. It's big, it's heavy, it's hard to move around. It comes out of the shop 2 or 3 times a year at the most. I think this year right now, as the calendar is developed for summer, I only have one show on the books for that rig. It's a 2-day festival, but I love that rig, man, and that rig is making me money. I got into it very reasonably. It's a point source rig. It's not something most guys want to carry around, but the reality of my financial world is I also own a bunch of JBL passive SRX stuff, and specifically I would say the 700 series passive has made more money between that and the Vertec line array, which I may end up buying next year. I don't even know. Has made more money for guys than probably any other brand, on the market. I have a whole bunch of 700 series, and I have some STX subs. Yeah, passive subs. So it's a JBL. My phone keeps blowing up here, so sorry guys. That is the life of a busy production engineer. Anyways, I made more money off that JBL stuff than I have any of the EAW stuff. I would love to go and blow 150K in, a D&B rig or an acoustic rig, even an RCF rig. Even dumping, say, 60 grand into an RCF rig. A buddy of mine wants to sell me a QSC wide line array. I'm kind of in the market for a line array. But, I'm sitting here having this ROI conversation with myself. Like, do I really have enough work that justifies dumping 35 or 40 grand to 150 grand into a line array rig? And really the answer to that right now in this very second of where CLP Audio and Staging is living is no. I fly, my SRX stuff with my mobile stage and that sort of thing. And man, it has no problem covering, a crowd of 2,000-3,000 people, maybe even 4,000 people right in front of the stage. I run 4 STX passive 828s across the front of the stage, and I fly 2 SRX 722s on each side of the stage. And that rig, I just did a festival last weekend with it where we had about 3,000 people. That rig just absolutely kills, and in the environment of people complaining about volume all the time, it's a perfect rig for what I'm doing, and it's paid for, it's absolutely paid for. I got a bunch of Crown Macro i 5000 stuff on it, the new digital stuff that powers that JBL stuff greatly. I bellyache and complain about the sound quality of the JBL stuff all the time. The running joke in my company is we got to, EQ out all the JBL. Some of the higher end guys say the JBL stands for junk but loud. Hey, the reality of it is I've never had a client complain about JBL. Never. I've never had a client come to me and complain and say my rig sounds like, dog snot. It's never happened. I'm usually the only guy standing there saying, I just don't like the way this rig responds. I don't like the way it sounds, but it's okay. It's a workhorse rig. It's a middle of the road rig. It gets the job done. It's light. It's easy to carry around. I can stack by myself these 722s. I can stack 725s by myself. I'm kind of a big guy, but, I wouldn't recommend that, but, they're easy to go around. The 728 subs are iconic, subs in the middle market, because I'm talking all about middle market audio here. And I know guys, I got a buddy of mine that has a pair of 728s that, man, he's been doing 100 gigs a year on those subs for, man, I don't know, maybe close to 12 years, 13 years. He's never replaced a driver. And them subs will pound your brains out in every club and small, outdoor event that he does. He just has a single stack rig. He's using 728 subs, 725 tops. Pounding them with, pounding with iTech 6000s for a long time, but then he had a 6000 go down, and I think I put him on two 3402s in bridge mode for the subs, and he's still using an XTI 6000 on the tops. So, the speakers have outlasted the amps. I mean, it's insanity, man, And you see these guys that blow all this money on these new powered plastic boxes, or even I'm not a huge fan of the new SRX 800 powered stuff, that JBL has out. The mid-high boxes aren't too bad. I could live with them. But the subs are horrible. They sound good when they're working, but I can't even begin to tell you how many guys I know that's blown drivers, blown plate amplifiers, all that kind of stuff. They didn't put any fans in those plate amplifiers. They're heat sink cooled, and they overheat and they burn up. Absolutely burn up. When I bought my 828 STX passive subs, actually a buddy of mine from a neighboring city, him and I drove 6 hours to Cincinnati to buy, 4 pair of those. He was replacing, I think it was 6 pair of the SRX 828 powered subs. And of those 6, I think he had 1 that was still operational. The rest of them had blown drivers, or plate amplifiers were burned up in them, or, they just cannot put out the SPL that the passive stuff can. It's a fact. Don't get mad at me if you're someone that owns a bunch of that stuff. I mean, if you use it and you're nice to it and you're super careful with it, I do know a couple guys that's had some success with them, but, man, if you're going to drive them and pull any serious, sound pressure out of them, it's just a matter of time before, you're going to have an issue with those. I don't know why, and JBL, if you're listening to me, go back to the 700 series designs. Can we just go back to that? I just installed a pair of 728s in a club down in Columbia, Maryland, and everybody just raves about how good it sounds. I mean, those subs last for decades, guys. Decades. Absolute decades. So that's ROI. That's getting a whole lot of bang for your buck. You know what I'm saying? That's the whole point of this video, is talking about things like that. And I try to buy this stuff. I just drove to New Jersey about 3 weeks ago and bought a pair of 728 subs, 725 tops, and 715 tops. 6 boxes. And I got all of them for, I think it was $3,500. Now, I had to come home. I had to send all the grills out to powder coat because they were kind of rough looking. I had to paint all the boxes. I went through all the drivers and made sure all the drivers were okay. The inside of the boxes looked brand new. All the drivers checked out perfectly. And that's kind of going to be a B-rig for me. And I'll say, at the end of the day, I might have had $4,000 in that after refinishing everything and, getting them up to par where they need to be. I could double my money out of those things in a second because everybody is falling over themselves trying to find that gear because it works and it lasts forever. That is ROI. That is getting a great return on your investment. I try to buy all my gear that way. I typically buy most of my pro audio stuff used because the price of stuff new right now is just going through the roof. It's absolutely mind-boggling how much stuff costs. So the used market is on fire, and that's, of course, JBL quit making that 700 series stuff. Even the STX stuff was great. All that passive JBL stuff was just phenomenal, guys. It really was. It's stuff that just simply worked and sounded good. It didn't sound phenomenal. It didn't sound great. It sounded good, and your clients are never going to complain about it, So that's one example of, trying to buy equipment that you're going to actually make money on. The other thing is like, I know a lot of guys. I'm an M32 guy. I got 3 M32s in my inventory. A lot of guys are talking smack about M32 because Behringer or, Music Tribe has kind of abandoned North America as far as service and stuff like that. What I did discover is if you buy that stuff from Sweetwater, they will stand behind it. They have a repair shop, and stuff like that. They will help you out with that so you're not abandoned by it. M32 is still an industry standard. You can still go into clubs all over the place and middle market venues and find M32s. They're rider friendly because most people are traveling, even a bunch of B national bands are traveling with X32 racks or M32 core with a DL32 stage box set up for their ears. So they're just using a split snake, and so everyone's familiar with that format. So again, return on investment. I feel like you can really get a good return on that investment because it's so rider friendly and it's so readily available, and everybody is familiar with the format. And I've got one M32C DL32 setup that's probably got, 600 shows on it right now. I haven't had any issues with it, by the grace of God. Gear breaks. People want to hammer on the fact that, on some of the live consoles, the faders and the encoders and stuff can get a little glitchy after, a few years of service. Well, yeah, but you're talking about, a $3,500 console or whatever. It's not a $30,000 console. You got to really put things in perspective that way. Go buy a $30,000 console and then see how long it takes you to earn that money back. The M32 stuff, even in all that middle of the road Yamaha and Allen and Heath stuff is great. The Allen and Heath stuff has a long track record of durability, and that sort of thing. I just like the M32 ecosystem. It's just kind of how I roll. It's been good to me. There's more guys that are used to the M and X32 format than are the Q or the SQ. Now, 10 years from now, that might be a different story because I think the SQ is kind of taking over the market. But I'm not going to buy an SQ anytime soon because I'm trying to watch my pennies so that I can turn them into dollars, It just kind of is what it is. So let me take this to the next step and give you some examples of how you can kind of get yourself in trouble buying gear. And I see this scenario all the time. You get a guy who's an absolute gear junkie. All he wants to do is buy gear, and I mean, let's face it, this industry is always asking for more. I think I put a big thing up on Facebook not long ago where we were having a conversation about the cost of doing business in the production business. And there were some bands on there kind of belly aching and complaining about how, they want production guys to bring more gear to the gig, and stuff like that. And I laid out this scenario. So you take, engineer John here, who just come out of sound school, let's say he's got some rich parents and decides that he's going to get into, starting his own production deal. He buys his first rig. He blows, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000 on that rig before it's all done and over with. That's about what it costs to put together a small mobile rig. That's all fine and good. He cuts some corners on lighting, buys some Chinese-made stuff. He's trying to, give his clients what they want. 2-3 years down the road, his gear starts falling apart. He didn't buy really reliable, long-lasting passive stuff. He went the easy route. Let's say he bought a, I'm not going to mention any brand names. He bought a plastic-powered system. Couple speakers on sticks, couple single 18s. I know guys in downtown DC that's killing with that rig, showing up in their SUV, doing corporate stuff. That's all fine and good. But then what happens is, he's the cheapest guy in town for a while, and he realizes, man, I'm not really turning a serious profit here. Maybe he was doing this on the weekends and he had a day gig, so that was okay. That wasn't a big deal. He can do that. But he wants to go full time. He wants to follow his dreams and live the American dream and do this full time. So he goes to the bank and, he's starting to get bigger and better gigs, and bands are requiring more and more lighting and requiring double stack rigs and requiring a rig that can cover a couple thousand people or something like that, or even 1,000 people. We'll call that the next intermediate step. So he goes to the bank and he borrows money. Let's say he puts out a second mortgage on his house, and he's up and, buys $60,000, $80,000 worth of gear. Now he's got a nice rig. He's got something that's going to make him some money. Bought a trailer. He bought a truck, to pull the trailer. You'd be surprised how quick you can end up at 150 grand, when you start adding that stuff up. I'm setting in a $70,000 truck right now, and pull a $5,000 trailer that's loaded with $60,000, $70,000 worth of gear regularly, So Johnny's starting to make, he started out making $300-$400 a night. Now he's starting to make a consistent $550 a night, $600 a night, that sort of thing. And then now he's in a market where he's competing with other guys on his level. Before, he was in the lower middle market where he didn't have a lot of competition. Now he's right smack dab in the middle of the road of the middle market, and he's competing with a bunch of other guys who got more gear than him, who's been in the business longer than him, they're more networked than him. In order for him to get to work, he's going to have to kind of cut their throats and cut his prices. And, this goes on and goes on, and he's robbing Peter to pay Paul to make his loan payments, things like that. He's under stress at home from his wife. Let's say he has a kid or two, that sort of thing. If you don't have your eyes on return on investment, your ROI, it's going to be real easy to keep sinking money into this so that you have a better production rig than the guy down the street. Not to mention there's always a gig that comes up that requires something you don't have, and then you end up having to buy it for that one gig, thinking, well, I'll have it in the future. But then those gigs only come up every now and then. I've gotten to a place in my business where I'm just walking away from stuff like that, because, I don't want to spend, $5,000 to make 10 grand. You know what I mean? I don't want to spend $5,000 to do a gig that may or may not come back. I mean, yeah, okay, it adds to the inventory. That's great. That sort of thing. I don't rent out a whole bunch of my stuff because I just really don't want people tearing my stuff up. My stuff is hard enough to maintain with me using it and doing the, 150 to 175 shows a year that we do. It's hard on gear, man. It really is. You're constantly having to maintain things. You're constantly having to spend time in the shop. And, your time is worth something too. That's what I tell people when I bid jobs. It's like, you're not just paying for the gear that I'm bringing to the table. You're paying for the 40 hours I spent in the shop last week, making sure that gear is well maintained and in good working order and going to be able to do what we're setting out to do. So yeah, plus you're paying for a ton of experience. You know, a lot of times, especially on the club level stuff, man, on the club level stuff, you know, if you're making $400 to $800 a night, you know, bringing on average $100,000 worth of equipment, you know, to the table with production equipment and transportation to get it there and that kind of stuff. That $400 to $800 a night is really about what the equipment costs, you know, to rent. Like if you just went and rented the raw equipment, that's about what it would cost. So the market is super tight. And if you don't keep, you know, your numbers in place and you're not real careful with how you spend money, it will consume you. Because let's take Johnny's scenario we were just talking about here and fast forward, you know, 3 years, 4 years, something like that. His gear's starting to fall apart. He's having to invest more money in keeping up with gear, doing gear maintenance. There's new stuff that's released. You know, he needs a second sound console to be able to do a festival, to be able to have a separate monitor console. That requires, you know, a split of some kind, an audio split. They're not cheap. Plus all of the AC power distribution stuff that you got to have on that level. All that stuff is crazy expensive. I just spent, it was like $2,500 or $3,000 just on like some feeder cable and a couple spider boxes that I can add in on my generator rentals, because the rental companies were killing me renting, you know, feeder cable and spider boxes, you know, breakout boxes. So when I go to rent the generator is already expensive enough as it is, and I'm talking for like festival level stuff, you know. You know, I'm at least able to save my client a couple $100 by, you know, bringing my own feeder cable and spider boxes to the table. This stuff's insane. You know, this B rig I was just talking about a little while ago that I went to New Jersey and got, it was $3,500, $4,000 after the restoration of just the boxes. That doesn't count the other 10 or 12 grand that I spent just in things like mic cables, direct boxes, a second mic kit, mic stands, cases and racks to put all this stuff in. And I already had all the power amps, you know, which is another 10, 12 grand worth of stuff. There's 30, 40 grand worth of gear, not counting any kind of power distribution stuff. You know, that's just a basic single stack rig. Now it should last me for, you know, years to come. But, you know, if you're not super smart about putting that stuff together, you know, if Johnny is not super smart about how he's spending his money, he's only one trailer blowout away from being out of business. And I've seen that happen. I've seen, you know, a buddy of mine just told me last year that he was coming over the Bay Bridge, you know, coming back from Southern Maryland somewhere. And the Bay Bridge is a big deal. If you're not from the area and don't know what the Bay Bridge is, it's the biggest bridge in our area, in the Mid-Atlantic. And, you know, he had a blowout in a truck and almost sent him over the side of the bridge. Not to mention he was stranded on the bridge for, I think it was like, I don't even know, man. It was like 3 or 4 hours, you know, trying to get a tow truck up there to get him off the bridge. And, you know, I mean, it was just an absolute freaking nightmare. That stuff costs money. You know, I was working with a corporate band one time that had a blowout along I-81 out here, and just to have somebody come out and replace a trailer tire was $400, and that was 10 years ago. It's probably $500 or $600 now. Not counting the fact that it tore a $400 fender off the side of his trailer. You know, when you're barely making gear payments and barely getting by and trying to be competitive, it's real easy to spin your way right out of this business. It really is, you know. And that's why you have to be super smart in how you buy gear. You know, you have to be super smart in what gear you buy, you know, and let go of that keep up with the Joneses kind of mentality, and use gear that you have in your current systems right now, you know, that are getting the job done, and just, you know, not chase the next, you know, flavor of the week gear. You know what I mean? I remember when L Acoustics, you know, first hit the United States and went bonkers. there were guys that were just, spending hordes amount of money. I mean, just crazy money. Re-outfitting everything that they did with acoustic stuff. Now, if you got a pro touring schedule that supports that and it made you money, hey man, more power to you. But I know it wasn't but like a year or so after that COVID happened, and some of them companies went out of business. Like they ended up just selling everything. And that's when guys like me show up to try to buy stuff at a discounted rate, because it's the only way I can afford to buy anything like that. And I'm a very small company. I'm one guy with a handful of 1099 part-time guys that help out on the weekends. And, I have to watch every nickel and dime I spend. I'm very fortunate in the fact that my home is paid for, and that gives me some breathing room and stuff like that. The reason I bought a mobile stage last year was because the return on investment is insane with that thing. And it's done nothing but make me money, and will probably pay for itself within the first 2 years. And if I wasn't blowing a lot of that stage money on audio, trying to keep up with that festival level stuff, to probably pay the thing off in 2 years. But I'm sitting here like halfway wanting to buy a line array rig. And it's like, I don't know if I'm going to pull the trigger on that or not, because everybody raved about how good our stuff sounded this past weekend. I don't really need a rig that's going to throw 300 feet. I need a rig that's going to throw really good the first 75 to 100 feet. And then it can just be whatever it is beyond that. I don't have to be the biggest, loudest guy in town to make a living. When you start letting go of that kind of mentality, then that's when you can really start getting in a place to where you're actually making money. I am trying desperately to not spend any more money on gear the rest of this summer season. And it seems like every week, something's coming up. I need to spend at least $500 or $600 on cables, or I don't have enough extension cords, or this, that, and the other. I mean, it's like just never ends, man. But I think I have all the major pieces of the puzzle together in my world. Probably gonna have to spend some money on lighting again this year. I got to be super smart about it. I got to use the stuff that I have in place and try to make that stuff last if I'm going to, make it in this business. Because I know a boatload of guys that got in this business, thought they were going to make a quick buck, and within the first 5 to 7 years, they ended up selling everything, going back to their IT career, or, going into a different trade altogether. Because it's a hard business to be in. The middle market is crazy competitive. There's a ton of guys everywhere trying to, be better than the guy down the street. And let's face it, that's just the principles of the free market. We're all trying to do the best we can do. I'm very fortunate in the fact that I have a very good reputation. I'm very established, so I don't really struggle too much. I'm usually someone's first or second phone call when they're looking for production. And I work a big area. I work 100-mile radius of where I live at. And, we beat the road a lot, but we're making enough money to justify that by the time you pay staff and that sort of thing, you cannot be making fatal errors buying gear. You can't do it, And Johnny, the guy we were talking about, to conclude his story, is he gets to a place where he wakes up one day and he realizes, I am busting my ass, 3 and 4 days a week. And really, after all the overhead and after all the expenses, I'm only turning, $30,000, $40,000 a year. If he's lucky. And I mean really smart, he's turning $30,000, $40,000 a year. That's not a lot of money in today's world. Especially if you live in any kind of major metropolitan area. I live out in West Virginia where taxes are cheap, and groceries are cheap and, things like that. If I had to live in Baltimore or DC, the areas that I service, I'd have to have another job. There's no way, And I do really well at what I do. I'm probably one of the guys that is making the most money at at what I do in my circle of competitors, you know. It's still tough. It's still super, super tough. Uncle Sam's not doing you any favors either. They tax the daylights out of you, and, you know, with all the permits that you have to get from municipalities to do business. I've been fighting with a local municipality for 2 months, you know, trying to get some paperwork just to do a gig that don't pay near enough. You know, I'm doing it because one of the guys that works for me is playing in the headlining band of that show, and I'm trying to do a favor to him. But, you know, I'm sitting here like, no wonder no one's doing any business with this municipality, you know, because you guys make it so hard to do business in your district. It's easier for me to go someplace else and make money, you know. But that's all part of the game. Those are all the things that most people don't see. You know, bidding jobs is the other thing. I can't tell you how many times new guys that are in the business, they call me and they're like, man, I just don't know how to bid a job. How do you bid a job? You know, and it's like, well, man, you know, I'll give you a little bit of help, but, you know, I'm not trying to train my competition to come out here and cut my throat and, you know, take my business away from me either. I mean, you have to practice some couth, guys. I'm a super nice guy and I have no problem helping people, but there comes a point where it's like, I don't want to train my competition to be, you know, as good or better than me, or be able to do business better than me. That's not very smart business, you know, sense. So some of those conversations I just have to kind of bail out of and just be like, look, man, those are trade secrets. You know, those are things that you got to figure out on your own, the same way I had to figure it out. Nobody came to me and said, JR, here's how you bid jobs. Here's what you should charge for this. Here's what you should charge for that. And, you know, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. That stuff I had to learn the hard way, and you're going to have to learn the hard way too. So it is what it is. I know this conversation kind of went long, but there's a lot, and I really didn't touch on everything I wanted to talk about, but there's a lot that can be discussed when it comes to the business side of this. Most people don't want to talk about it for all the reasons I just mentioned. I already have my friends that are my competitors are like, dude, you need to stop this YouTube thing because you're training and equipping these you know, new guys, you know, to just come out here and steal work from us. Well, I mean, you know, I don't think so. They think so. It worries them. It doesn't worry me. I'm already established. You're not going to take any bread out of my mouth. And if you do, then hey, man, more power to you. I'm not mad at you. You know, it's a free market. But at the same time, you're still not getting me. You know, and any of my clients will tell you that when you get me, there's a whole lot of things that you get that aren't very easy to teach. You know, I have a very strong work ethic. I'm a detail guy, and I don't cut corners, and I put an enormous amount of time in my systems and my shop during the week, making sure that everything is what it should be. And I have incredible troubleshooting skills. So when things do go wrong, because they will go wrong at some point, you know, I'm really good at adapting and overcoming. And that only comes from decades of experience. And it's not the kind of thing you can just teach in a 30-minute YouTube video. So I hope this helps you guys. I hope it puts some things in perspective for you. I hope it kind of, you know, sheds some light on how to make money in this business. You know, buy gear that gets the job done. Take care of that gear. Buy gear that you know that will last decades. That EAW 850 rig that I was telling you about, that rig is probably 30 years old, 35 years old. It's been well maintained, and I can take it to any show and it will completely rip your face off. I mean, it's an amazing rig. It's big and it's heavy to move around, and I don't like to move it any more than I have to, but it's a great example of ROI. There has been multiple people that has owned that rig over the years that has made a boatload of money from it. So, yeah. There you go. Please like and subscribe and follow and all that kind of stuff. I would like to build the channel a little bit more. Share this stuff on social media with people you think can benefit from it. If you know young guys that are in school for this is a great video for them to talk to. My greatest advice is if you're coming out of a sound school trying to get into the production business, don't start your own production company. Go work as a house guy at a club or at a resort or someplace like that, even a church. Get a house gig and hone your skills in a house gig, and then quietly wait on those deals from the used market, the pre-owned market to come along, and build a system in the background while you're a house guy somewhere. Take 5 or 6, 7 years to do that, and then when you decide to go out on your own and become a production company, you have inventory and you have gear to do it, and you don't have to bite it all off at one time. The elephant is always easier to eat if you're eating one bite at a time. And that's how I did my stuff. That's how I grew over the years. Plus you can create a really good reputation as a house guy, and it's a really good environment to hone your mixing skills and your troubleshooting skills and your system tech skills. So, hope this helps. We'll see you next time.